What's up, amigos? Commander Jaime here today. We're going to go over some premium plays with Genesis. We got a new card that's coming out soon called Veratrum. It is a grade 2, and we're going to actually see some of the combo plays that this card actually enables us defensively. So let's get right into it.
What's up, amigos? We have an awesome playmat over here for October. It is actually by Next Level Gaming. They just came out with this Halloween special. As you can see, it is Zorga using Alchemagic to revive some units that we know from Grand Blue, and it's really epic. And so if this is something that you'd like to purchase, use the affiliated link provided in the description.
So when this card is actually placed into Guardian Circle, you can actually counterblast one, Soul Blast through, choose one of your opponent's rearguard circles that has a standing unit. They check the top card of the deck and actually place a card on top of their rearguard circle chosen. And the auto abilities are not activated at that time too. So what it really enables Genesis is to be a defensive play. And with that being said, you got cards that almost are like similar in nature, as in Gear Chronicle, such as Hetero Around, that disrupt those plays. And in the form of a grade 2, that's actually really nice, especially since we have a card that can Soul Blast during that opponent's battle phase. And I'll break down a little bit of that combo too. Before, one of the pseudo denial griffin plays that Genesis actually had was the secret Elsie and the Vanargandr over here. So with these two cards, you're able to Soul Blast the Vanargandr, use Fenrir skill to counter blast, and be able to call it and then retire. So this card makes alleviation a little bit of that too, and we may not need to use Secret Icy anymore as well. So this can be as like a substitute. And there are some concerns to think about too. As you can see, it does cost a counterblast, so you have to mitigate some of the counterblast. You have to mitigate some of that counterblast management. So we'll dive into some cards that actually help with that too and go from there. So as you can see, there are two key cards that I want to specifically point out too. We have over here Goddess of Declined Hell, and we have over here Claimer Harry. So these are G-era cards. So this is definitely specific to premium. So whenever you want to actually use your Sentinel grade 1, it has the ability to countercharge if there's another copy of it in the drop zone. This is the old G-era Sentinels where you can countercharge essentially, but do keep in mind they do only protect the Vanguard, which is typically okay most times, unless you want to defend a rearguard in that sense, but more than likely this is okay too. So that's another option to be able to like handle with that counterblast management. Again, it'll counterblast, Soul Blast 3, and now you have to like mitigate that as well. And we use Soul Blast 3. So this card over here on the right, Claimer Harry, is very unique. So it's a form of countercharging. So it's a GB1 card, and when you have a card that goes from the drop zone to the soul from the drop zone, you can actually bottom deck that card and then countercharge 1. So that way you can just do that, and it pays for itself in a sense. And if you, let's say, Soul Blasted something that you want to return, typically triggers, right? And so you can start bottom decking those triggers, and then eventually you'll shuffle the deck as well. So it helps that utility on helping your deck on having those key pieces. I know some players, when they play Genesis, Pale Moon, or even Dark Irregulars, soul charging triggers can be cringing. So this is another way to like help with that cringe, right? So I think these are two cards that are definitely worth checking out to countercharge. I think the most viable, easily one, is also Claimer Harry, because if you have more than one on the field too, you'll be able to countercharge for every single of them. So you Soul Blast 3, you can have technically 3 Claimer Harrys and actually be able to bottom deck all the 3 cards and countercharge 3 during your opponent's battle phase, and it's just like, whoa, that's pretty cool. And then during your turn, as you're Soul Blasting and using your Counter Blast, it also refunds itself. So Claimer Harry may actually be the card you want to go with, but you know, it's also worth noting the PG that can countercharge as well. Now onto cards that actually have effects when they're Soul Blasted. So if you're playing Regalia, this is one of the cool things that I've always like saw right off the bat. As soon as we get a Soul Blasting card that does it during the battle phase, during your opponent's turn, cards like the original Norn and also Achilles would actually help buff up your Vanguard. So this was also pointed out to Astral Susanoo. He's actually a content creator too, so he made a video about this too, and he reminded me that even the stand trigger has a similar effect. And the effect is that basically when it's Soul Blasted, you can choose up to one of your Regalia Vanguards and give it plus 5k until the end of the turn. Now, that's really cool because you Soul Blast 3. So if you Soul Blast any combination of these 3, you can essentially buff up your Vanguard plus 5k, plus 10k, or even plus 15k. And that could be really nice. So on top of Disruption, you can beef up your Vanguard on top of that. So then the rest of the turn, you don't have to guard as much. In fact, depending on the multi-attack clan that you're facing against too, some of their attacks are really just making that 23k mark over a trigger threshold. So making it a 28k Vanguard can help with those attacks. There are other decks that make beefy multi-attack columns, but this helps with that. So it's another like 15k you don't have to worry about in that sense too. Other useful things too is that you're also maybe consider the soul management as well aspect. So you're Soul Blasting 3, and Soul Blast 3 is usually typically noticeable. A lot of our Vanguards that Soul Blast 3 or 6 use that amount of soul as well. Soul Blast 3 is almost like a multiple of some of the skills and a staple number that we rely on. So any cards that help with soul charging in that aspect can help with that too. So that's why we have two cards over here, such as the old Grappa and the old Valencia. So when they're soul blasted, you can soul charge too. So that way you can actually refill the soul. And if you only soul blasted one of them, it essentially becomes a net soul blast 1. Or if you did soul blast both of them, then it's a net plus soul in the soul, if you think about it that way too. So it helps with that soul management aspect. I feel like that may not be as much of a concern, but I just wanted to throw out that too as well. So now to take it up a notch a little bit, like, can we extend more from this? And we actually can. And if your Vanguard is Fenrir, we all know that we're able to revive cards from the soul whenever they're soul blasted. So such as the old interaction with Secret Elsie and Vanargandr, you no longer need Secret Elsie, but you can still have access to the Vanargandr play as well. And so you may be asking, well, if you're already doing kind of like a hetero round effect, why would you want a Vanargandr on top of that? And that's actually pretty cool if you think about it. If you're already disrupting one column of attacks, and if your opponent has the other column, or potentially Excel circles, now you can retire anything else as well. So it further disrupts their turn, weakening their plays too, and it can mean the difference too on top of that. And there is a likelihood where the card called on top of that one rearguard circle can potentially be something better for the opponent. So it's not always guaranteed to be something subpar compared to what you know, spend in a sense, or in this case forced retire in that sense. So Vanargandr gives you that guaranteed retire to make sure that that circle doesn't happen anymore at all. It's also worth noting that it chooses the circle, the grade 2, and that's very key because there are some cards that have resist or other cards that kind of give other units resist. So it gets around those types of units too. So it helps in that regard too. Another card worth noting is Suadela. So this card is a great one where you basically, when it's on place, you can rest this card, give your Vanguard plus 10k, and the next time you Soul Blast, it is reduced by 2. So the main aspect of this card is that it helps beef up your Vanguard, but just being a standalone card that's generic too. As we saw with Norn and Achilles, it's more restricted to Regalia, and it's also only plus 5k for each of those copies in Regalia. So this grade 1 actually does a plus 10k, which is worth in the sense of 2 cards, and it's generic too. So you can just kind of have it in your deck as a tech if you really wanted to, and then the next time you Soul Blast 2 during that turn, you can actually kind of benefit from that. So if you had a second copy of the Veratrum, then you can, you know, all of a sudden reduce that Soul Blast, and now it becomes Counter Blast 1, Soul Blast 1 in that sense for the second time that you're doing that too. So that grade 1 might be able to be like a tech choice too, that might be seen in play too. I just wanted to mention that as well. Another way to increase your defensiveness is really using cards like Gleipnir and Vine over here. So what these two cards do, Gleipnir is on place, you Counter Blast 1, Soul Charge 1, then grab any card from Soul and add it to your hand. Same thing with Vine, but a little bit different. There's no Counter Blast, no Soul Blast, it's just discarding a card on place, choosing a normal unit from your Soul and adding it to your hand. So this enables you to add any card that can be a potential key piece, and the choice with Gleipnir can grab triggers or sentinels or heal triggers that are also triggers as well, and it just helps you with that regard. You could also get a copy of the Vanguard too if you want to do Ultimate Stride and you do play Ultima compared over the over trigger, so that's also that beneficial. Or you could just need a grade 3 to be able to stride next turn in case you want to go into a different stride besides Murdic that turn as well. So I think these cards are pretty cool in the sense that you can just like improve your hand in a sense during your opponent's turn, and they might not see that coming as well. Some even more fun cards. And so with Prometheus and Artic, they're similar skills, the same exact skills. So when it's placed, you can check the top 2 cards of your deck, put one into Soul, and then put the other one back on top of the deck. So if you call this during your opponent's battle phase, you can stack your deck in a sense. And that way, if your chances of seeing a trigger potentially, that can help you defensively too. So if you do have to take a damage later on anyway, that extra trigger can make a difference. That's assuming if you do see a trigger. It's not guaranteed, but it's another thing like, I can kind of get an idea of how I want to guard after this attack of, you know, guarding with the grade 2 in that sense too. So I just wanted to mention that because this also works during your opponent's battle phase too. Now lastly, we're playing some utility cards. There's actually a lot of Genesis cards that have on-play skills, so there's almost a limitless list of cards that you can try out. But these are, I feel like, that still are worth pointing out. So there might be some just different cards that you can revive in some of those, you know, random situations. I know Croute, for example, has been played in Fenrir prior to the ban list with Tarot Hit as well. But, you know, it's something like, okay, so if I Soul Blast this guy and then I use a Counter Blast to, you know, revive it, I can essentially Soul Charge as many cards as I have on the field. So potentially that could be Soul Charge 6 or 4 or something, which can also mitigate that Soul Blast management. So that's another way that this card can fall into that category. There's also the, like, such as attacks such as Honoly. You can call it during your battle phase, especially if, let's say, when you pay the Counter Blast to revive it, you have no Counter Blast. Then when it's placed, it forces you to do a Counter Blast, but then it doesn't matter. It's just one of those skills that just go through as well. And then if your opponent has much more, you know, attacks, such as like scaled out Excel circles, if you're playing against maybe Gold Paladin or Aquaforce, for example, or even Tachikaze that starts like scaling with Excel circles, it can help with that too, potentially. So it's just another option that I just wanted to point out in case you want to like play out, but ultimately there's a lot of choices that you can go with that. And that's the combo explained, and also some of the options to mitigate some of the Counter Blast management, the Soul Blast management, and also some like extension of the combos too. Fenrir has a lot more options because you can have those lines of play extended because you're able to revive cards. I think Fenrir, out of all the decks, got the most benefit because you have a lot more options that help defensively. I think with the ban list too, with Taro being hit, Fenrir was in a point where it couldn't like necessarily like finish games. It still has access to great cards, but I feel like this grade 2 Veratrum actually just like adds to the flavor at that point. So you don't necessarily have to build your deck around this grade 2, but it can be added to your deck. Whether you're playing Fenrir, Regalia, or some type of other Genesis deck for fun, it might be a time to reconsider some of your old decks. You know, there's also, you know, Himiko, there's some of the other grade 3s that you can play with. Maybe Astral Deity, I'm not too sure, but it's one of those things that you can play around with and now have this access utility that really helps with Genesis overall. And if there's some key combos or some key cards that you feel like that are worth mentioning, feel free to comment down below. I like to have a conversation and share the knowledge around to anybody that's interested in playing Genesis too. And, you know, what I really like about this is that it gives Genesis a new way to like compete in the metagame if you wish to play Genesis in the metagame too. So if you liked the video, give it a like down below, comment down below, what are your thoughts too? I like to have a conversation. Share the video with a fellow Genesis player or a Fenrir or Regalia type of player too that would enjoy this kind of content too. And of course, subscribe, amigos. Bye!